Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. It's my youngest son's birthday today, so he's not awake and probably won't be until the podcast is posted in late afternoon, which I imagine we have to let him do on his birthday, but it's the normal course of things certainly during the summer and during our pandemic times as well. But what can I tell you? Things are set to change in September when our school system opens with all distance learning after, of course, doing all the work of planning a possibility for hybrid attendance, and had to go and do that, of course. And then things took a turn for the worse. You probably all heard about this whole pandemic thing. Maybe your school systems are doing the same, or maybe you live in Georgia where they just keep opening them regardless. Story about yet another Georgia school that opened up early for no particular reason other than it looked like it might be politically advantageous to Donald Trump to have them do so, and everybody's sick. I'll give you the details on that one in just a minute. First, we'll start with Bill's morning tweet, just so we know what the hell we're doing today. Daily Coast Radio is live now. On today's show, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, confirms that the 1917 Spanish flu has gotten everyone in America out of all their outstanding parking tickets. You're welcome, and I'm glad I could deliver that news to you. Yeah, this is it's getting kind of weird out there. Yesterday, the president has restarted his more or less impromptu and announced day of press conferences, which he abandoned for a while. Remember when he adopted a new tone, though? Yeah, well, now he's back to the old tone, but under new tone circumstances. I mean, no one has ever disavowed the new tone, but he continues to do his press conferences and promise insane things. Mostly, I guess, just to shout out the talking points he wishes were true, that there's gonna be a great, big, beautiful vaccine just in time for Election Day, and he's gonna be the one that discovers it, or something. I don't know. Seems like garbage. I haven't been paying much attention to them except for the lies and gaffes as cataloged by those who watch it professionally. Yesterday's moment of greatest interest, I guess, is what? It's that the moment in which he blurted out that the 1918, did he say 17? Maybe. I don't remember what I think he said the 1918 flu pandemic probably ended the Second World War because all of the soldiers got sick. Now, I know that you know that the Second World War didn't start for some 20-something, I think somebody used the figure 27 years. And offhand, I haven't checked the math, and I guess it's about right, depending on when you think World War II started. I guess particularly for the Europeans, which was earlier than it started for us because we were latecomers to the war, et cetera, et cetera. We all learned that. And that 1918 or 1917 would not have had anything whatsoever to do with the outcome or the ending of World War II. Now, he has said this, you can't say correctly, but he has said this and said it with respect to ending the First World War before. That's problematic as well because, of course, it didn't really. It's just not really discussed as the end of the First World War. It came for the most part, after the end of the First World War. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's done this again and tied it to the end of any World War again, which really there's just no proof for. It makes Dinesh D'Souza's job that much harder for him to come out and backfill and help out with the governance by Wikipedia model that they love to use there in the White House, where they force people to come out and and say, no, the wrong thing was really Right, and we haven't had our answer about that from Dinesh D'Souza yet. I don't even remember what it was that he was trying to justify the other day. I forget. These things fall out of my head very quickly. It's fine. You got to make room for the new stuff. I did see someone taking a stab at a Dinesh D'Souza parody in trying to justify this. Oh yes, now I remember. Wasn't it? It was his pronunciation of, oh yes, it was Thailand. His pronunciation of Thailand as opposed to Thailand. And D'Souza spent the day insisting, I don't even remember exactly how the argument was supposed to go. I don't think I ever knew. I think it's not that I've forgotten. It's that I never bothered to really read through it. It was whatever. It was something ridiculous. I think it was his contention that native speakers, maybe, of the Thai language, who pronounced it something closer to it's not Thailand, but that they had some sort of unique pronunciation perhaps, and that it gave it more than just the Americanized, anglicized T, Thailand, that there was some sort of what do they? I don't remember what they call it for phonics people, the sounding of the H, but it wasn't entirely silent, and so therefore something. And if you were really sophisticated, you understood that this was the actual pronunciation. It went on for ages, and convinced exactly no one. So the parody here comes from Frank Lesser, who I don't know, who tweets as Sad Monsters, and describes himself in his bio as former Emmy-winning writer for the Colbert Report, which explains some of the humor here, and non-Emmy-winning writer for At Home with Amy Sedaris. So, okay, he's had an Emmy in his past, and you know where it came from, and his shot at it was Dinesh D'Souza saying, yes, elitist provincials laugh. Trump isn't referencing the 1918 Spanish flu, but the 1917 Portuguese grippe, which infected a young Hitler. After incubating 28 years, it suddenly became symptomatic in the bunker, and he sneezed so violently it blew his brains out. That's, I guess, the explanation for the 1917 pandemic, the one you didn't know about, ending World War II. So, I don't know, whatever. Even if you give him credit for having in the past said that the 1917 end of whatever, either the 1917 pandemic somehow which was the 1918 pandemic, had ended the war. Yes, he's associated with the correct war in the past, but there's no point in giving him credit because the rest of the assertion, the meat of the assertion is incorrect. So, okay, whatever. There you go. And he apparently lied about a dozen other different things as well. We could catch up on some of those things. More interesting to me, though, is the rate at which he's able to use the White House operation to force people to come around to making or revising their own statements such that it sounds like he might be correct, that the historical record will now reflect somehow that maybe he was right. Going back to last week and here's my example of it, Trump's insistence for unknown reasons, although we can take a guess as to what the reasons are, and we'll probably be right. He's a pretty simple guy to read. Insisting that the explosion in Beirut from last week, which most of the world has attributed, as fantastical as it seems, has attributed to a fire that, I don't know whether it started at this place or just caught and set everything off at a fireworks depot of some kind. I didn't even realize they had one there in Lebanon, but it's a sophisticated economy. Why not? Right? Not sure where the fire started, but at some point the fireworks storage depot catches on fire and you see all the fireworks going off. And that, I guess, kept the fire going, and it spread from there to the storage depot, very unsafe and unregulated storage depot for ammonium nitrate, which had at some point been seized from ships in the port there and just stored negligently for several years there by the government, thinking, when will the next door fireworks depot really catch on fire? Fireworks depots don't catch on fire. You would hear more about it if fireworks depots frequently caught on fire, wouldn't you? And people would notice these things. Actually, as it turns out, in discussing that fire, I was informed by some Dutch followers on Twitter that they too had a similar fire back in like year 2000 or so, where their local fireworks factory caught on fire. But it didn't explode quite to the magnitude of this thing, but it got a hold of it certainly spread to wherever they were storing their own fireworks explosives. And it was a massive explosion. So I guess with some frequency, fireworks factories catch on fire. It seemed like sort of cartoonish to me. That was the result of cartoonishly bad luck, perhaps, that a fireworks factory would catch on fire. But I guess it happens from time to time. Anyway, Trump went to the microphone that evening, I think, and said, basically said that despite the fact that everybody else was saying it was an accident, that it could have been a big attack. And he's been talking to awesome generals, and they all seemed to think it was an attack. And, I don't know whether he was trying to lay the predicate for some sort of intervention or what, or just wanted to be more dramatic. And, he likes the more dramatic interpretations of anything. He looks cooler as president if he gets to be hinting that he's getting all sorts of interesting briefings from secret sources all over the world about evil lurking out there and him standing in between it and the peaceful, idyllic American lives that we're all living during the pandemic. And anyway, point is that he was completely off his rocker, and I guess somebody must have asked the defense secretary about that too. Like, Trump said that a bunch of generals told him about this, and generals, we know where they work. They work in the Defense Department. You're the secretary of the Defense Department. What's the story with generals telling the president something so untrue and dangerous or speculative? And it might be something that they tell lots of presidents, but rarely have we had one who's just going to blurt it out like that unless he hears more. Well, they went into, Esper answered honestly, no one told him that. No one here thinks that. We all think it was an accident. Can't really account for what the president has to say, and certainly can't account for any generals that he spoke to saying that either. That, of course, reached the White House and angered the president, and he put into motion his plan to force Esper to say, well, at the very least, the president wasn't just plain wrong. He may know more than we do. He may have reached a different conclusion, but there was definitely substance of some kind to his idiotic fabrication that he had spoken to some great generals and that they seemed to think that it had been an attack. I've got 2 articles on it. It's that important. CNN wrote one for all of us regular rubes, I guess, who won't click on the defense1.com write-up of it, which is, I guess, a little bit more. If you are into dressing up cosplay as an awesome special operations soldier, and you're not busy counter-protesting at Black Lives Matter protests, you'll be reading Defense One, I guess. I'm sure I'm mischaracterizing their readership. The CNN headline on it, anyway, we'll share just one of the 2 articles and maybe a flavor of the CNN thing. Ryan Brown writes, Esper appears to backtrack on Beirut explosion cause after White House pushback. Read you the open graph or 2 here. Defense Secretary Mark Esper is downplaying any differences he had with the White House's assessment as to what caused the deadly explosion in Beirut after his speculation that the blast was likely the result of an accident drew pushback from the White House. The bottom line is we still don't know what caused the explosion, Esper told Fox News in an interview that aired this weekend. That would have been this past weekend. It's not going to happen this weekend. Otherwise, what would it be doing in the newspaper today? Anyway, on the first day, as President Trump rightly said, we thought it might have been an attack. Some of us speculated it could have been, for example, a Hezbollah arms shipment that blew up. Maybe a Hezbollah bomb-making facility. Who knows, Esper said, adding that the media was trying to stoke division between himself and President Trump. So blame it on the media as opposed to President Trump trying to stoke you into saying something that isn't true so that he doesn't look quite so dumb. I don't really know why he thought that would work. They could both be dumb. I do have room for that in my head. Defense One has this, I think, slightly different take on it in my early scan of this thing. Let's see. We've got their headline. Where's the byline, though? Our author's name is moved here. Okay. Katie Bo Williams, the national security correspondent for Defense One. Headline here, most believe, and that's in scare quotes, most believe Beirut blast, quote, accident, Esper says, contradicting Trump. The president said, quote, some of our great generals told him that the blast was, quote, a bomb of some kind, because generals never have any specific information about the kinds of bombs. And, some of our great generals might include Ulysses S. Grant or General Mills, who's fantastic logistics for breakfast cereals in World War II helped turn the tide of the war in the Pacific. I don't know what kind of generals this guy has in mind, but some of our great generals did this. You all know General Electric, of course, but that would be ridiculous. It's not going to be him. Defense Secretary Mark Esper on Wednesday afternoon said that most believe a massive explosion that devastated Beirut the day before was, quote, an accident. And I will say, I think like we said when we commented on it the first time around, there's always room for convincing people that a massive explosion in Beirut is something other than an accident. But it is an interesting measure of Trump's credibility that that's not something he could sell. Now, the story got out ahead of him that it was what most people believed, an accident. But I think a credible president probably could have brought people around on it, but we'll never know because Trump's not a credible president. Anyway, still getting information on what happened, Esper said, speaking at the Aspen Security Forum on Wednesday afternoon, because you should give your first national intelligence assessment to paying guests, I think, in the Trump administration anyway. Most believe that it was an accident as reported, and beyond that, I have nothing further to report on that. It's obviously a tragedy. So, normal comment. The explosion, which flattened central Beirut and has killed more than 100 people as of Wednesday afternoon, took place at a warehouse in Beirut's port area that Lebanese officials say housed thousands of pounds of explosive materials. The building consensus among Lebanese officials and weapons experts has been that the conflagration, good word, was the result of state negligence, and the Lebanese government has announced an investigation into why 2,750 tons of seized ammonium nitrate was left stored at the port for years. It's a good question. And most of the Lebanese government has resigned as a result over this, by the way. Trump on Tuesday, last Tuesday, of course, because today's Tuesday, said that, quote, some of our great generals told him that the blast was a bomb of some kind, but provided no evidence. I met with some of our great generals, and they just seemed to feel that it was an attack, he told reporters at the White House. This was not some kind of a manufacturing explosion type of event, and that's true, it wasn't. They would know better than I would. They seemed to think it was an attack. It was a bomb of some kind, yes. And he just flatly states it there. Okay. Which, no national or international security implications for the president just blurting that out, right? Multiple U.S. officials who spoke to Defense One on the condition of anonymity say that they have seen no evidence that the explosion was the result of any kind of attack by a country or non-state terrorist group. They pointed to the public explanations by Lebanese officials that tons of ammonium nitrate, a fertilizer that can be used in bomb making, was confiscated in 2014 and then left in the port warehouse until it combusted on Tuesday, after which it was gone. Just in case you wanted to follow up. I promise you that this catastrophe will not pass without accountability. Prime Minister Hassan Diab, says how I'm pronouncing it correctly, D-I-A-B. I haven't heard the name much on television, even lately. Well, this is what he said about the blast in a televised speech afterwards. Those responsible will pay the price, and they've all resigned. Facts about this dangerous warehouse that has been there since 2014 will be announced, and I will not preempt the investigations. Some port officials have been placed under house arrest as the investigation has begun. taking it seriously there. The explosions coincided with rising tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, which is, I guess, why Trump wanted it to be about them. Israel has long accused the Lebanese political group and militia of using, that's a good way of putting it, by the way, of using warehouse control at the port to smuggle weapons into Lebanon. The disaster comes before a decision in a politically sensitive murder trial related to the killing of ex-Prime Minister Rafik Hariri in 2005. 4 alleged Hezbollah members are accused of that murder. Israel has said that it had no involvement in the blast and has offered humanitarian assistance toward recovery efforts. Lebanon is also in the throes of a financial crisis that has its economy on the brink of collapse. There's little evidence that tensions related to any of those concurrent crises precipitated the blast, although Lebanon's strained economic situation combined with the breadth of the damage is hampering recovery and relief efforts. Hospitals damaged in a blast that was felt in Cyprus, 150 miles away, are overwhelmed by hurt and dying citizens. The U.S. Embassy warned American citizens to stay inside to avoid what Lebanese health officials say is a cloud of nitrous oxide in the city air. There are reports of toxic gases released in the explosion, so all in the area should stay indoors and wear masks if available, the embassy said. What a time to need some masks, right? One official familiar with the Lebanese investigation told Reuters in Beirut that although the question of storing the seized fertilizer safely had come up before official committees and judges, nothing was done. It is negligence, the official said. But more negligent still than that is allowing your Secretary of Defense to be put on the record trying to retroactively confirm the idiocy behind a presidential lie, which was offered for no reason. My guess, the only guess we can offer in this is that he thought it sounded cooler and or that maybe it would be an opportunity to launch a military strike you could claim was some sort of counterstrike against Hezbollah, maybe to do it jointly with the Israelis. The Israelis had no interest in it, and I guess Trump assumed that they might want to take the opportunity to launch such a strike. Probably Trump was thinking, oh, my good friend Netanyahu is in political trouble. He'll want to distract from that with a beautiful, beautiful war in Lebanon, and maybe I could help him do that. And then he found out no one's as stupid and crazy as he is, and he was left standing all alone. So rather than just stand there looking stupid and crazy, he said, I need the defense secretary to either look stupid and crazy along with me or to somehow, we could give it a shot. Why don't you pretend I'm not stupid and crazy and see how that goes? I want you to issue a statement that says I'm not stupid and crazy. And if anybody picks it up, that would be awesome. So that's where we stand on that front. Happens a lot, and we'll try to do our best to document more of it when it does happen. Let's see, other fun and interesting items to bring to your attention from the various roundups I've made. One, a coronavirus note or two. I mentioned in the opening of the show that there's yet another school that has run into trouble, and I almost feel like, I guess eventually there'll be too many for us to mention. But while they're still few and far between because hardly any schools are open yet, we might as well stay up to date. Another one in Georgia, this one I think coming from Georgia Public Broadcasting Network here, this report. More than 800 students in Cherokee County must quarantine due to COVID-19, written up here by Wayne Drash and Ellen Eldridge. Here's the story. More than 800 students and 42 teachers and staff in Cherokee County are quarantining after coronavirus was reported at 19 different schools, the school district announced late Monday. And remember, Monday is the first day of the school week. So, it's kind of right out of the box here. I don't know if it was their first day open or what, but let's find out. The number of students quarantining jumped by 300 from the start of the day, when the district reported 478 in quarantine due to COVID-19 infections reported at various schools. The district's updated note Monday evening said that 38 students and 12 teachers and staff tested positive for the virus just that day, I guess. At any rate, This is at Etowah High School. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Etowah. Nearly 300 students of the 2,400 total student population were quarantining. That's quite a lot, isn't it? What's the percentage-wise? I'm just sort of curious. I should be able to do this off the top of my head. If I wasn't also speaking on the radio, I might be able to do that math without the calculator. Here we go. 12.5%, 0.125. 12.5% of the total student population jumping straight into quarantine. I don't know how long the school's been open. We could probably research that, but you just want to know that it's what's happening. Etowah was one of the high schools last week where photographs went viral after dozens of students crammed together in front of the building without masks to celebrate their first day of school. At least front of the building is outside. That's better than being inside. I don't remember hearing the story about this one. Certainly we heard about the photographs. That was at in another county's schools. I didn't see this one circulating, but now I can see why. They were probably doing their best to suppress it. Here is the photo in question, tweeted around by Everything Georgia. Despite being in the middle of a pandemic, today Etowah High School in Cherokee County started their first day of school. Here is a senior's photo that was taken this morning. Two things striking about this photo. One, in the photo anyway, everybody's white. I mean, everybody. I searched and I really didn't see a darker than white on white face out there. So that was of some interest. The other thing, of course, is that they crammed the whole class together. It's not a big class, and there has to be more of them than just this, but they are really, they're stacked on top of one another. The front row sort of crouching down so the second row can be seen. They're right on top of one another. Not a brilliant idea to do, and now 800 of them are in quarantine. I don't know how much more you need to know about it than that. Just want to put that one on the record. We'll be back in 2 minutes to carry the ball forward on this topic and others after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue just a little bit anyway with more local color and detail about what's going on in Georgia, because why not? It's here and it's available to us. It helps us get a picture of what's going on down there. So there's the photo. I'll circulate the link where you can see the photo yourself. Rather foolishly taken, but moving on from there. They're just kids, although again, maybe an adult or two present at the school could have said, this isn't a great idea, really, frankly, and it would have even been a better idea to have them do it in masks. And normally people want to take the masks off for photos, but I don't know, maybe they did a mask on, mask off thing, which wasn't a great idea, but you can mark the time. You'll never forget what was going on in your senior year if you all take your picture in masks. But I guess they decided it wasn't a good idea, but yet decided that the picture was. The skyrocketing number of students in quarantine, the article continues, comes as a group of parents plan to hold a rally Tuesday morning. That would be now. Maybe you're listening to me at the rally. Hi, everybody, at Cherokee High School, to support teachers and the district's in-person reopening plans. Well, you shouldn't really rally for that. You should support the teachers by rallying in favor of a distance reopening plan, but that's Georgia for you. Earlier Monday, Governor Brian Kemp, who's driving this whole thing and is an idiot, ruled out a mask mandate for schools and said he believes the reopening of classrooms across Georgia has gone, quote, real well, with the exception of viral photos shared on social media that showed students crowded together. And, of course, widespread illness and suspicion of it. But we left that part out. We don't put that in his comment. It's gone real well, except for those schools where the viral photos came out. It turns out that they were photos of virus being spread, as a matter of fact, and now everybody is quarantining. I think, quite honestly, this week went real well, other than a couple of virtual photos, Kemp said. Not virtual. They were real photos. They went viral, and maybe he just didn't want to say the word viral. I don't know. With many schools reopening last week, in Georgia anyway, reports of children testing positive for coronavirus have stretched from, and if you're familiar with the the geography of the state, maybe this makes more sense to you. The reports of children testing positive stretched from Columbia County near Augusta, right, to as far south as Lee County near Albany. Wow. Well, okay, I'm not perfectly familiar with the map of Georgia, but I'm wondering, could I take a look and find out? We'll use directions on Google Maps, and let's see. We were talking about, near Augusta, right? What was the name of the county? Shoot, I've already lost track of my thing here. Columbia County and Lee County. Let's take a look. Columbia County to Lee County. Can't get there from here, apparently. Lee County, Georgia. Okay. Whoops, I forgot the Georgia part. That's what we're researching here. I like to find these things out live during the show, and I'm sure you do too. I'm just sort of curious about how that would look. I have to zoom. It's not immediately obvious, displaying the entirety of the state, but it looks like a pretty good chunk here. Yeah, so Columbia County is up near, if I zoom in on it, it looks like it's up near the South Carolina border, so in the northeastern-ish part of the state. Not on the coast like where Savannah is, but a couple hundred miles inland, I guess, or 100 or so, maybe we'll say miles inland. It looks actually not all that close to, at least the Columbia County seat where they pinpointed this thing is not all that close to Athens. It's about halfway between Athens and the South Carolina shoreline. And then Lee County is more towards the southwest, but it's still well north of Georgia's southern border, and not that far, but I don't know what kind of mileage we're talking about. But there's a pretty good chunk of space between Lee County's seat, anyway, and the Alabama border. But it is 205 miles or so, or I'm sorry, 182 miles if you take the straightest route between the county seats there. So, okay, a pretty good chunk of Georgia appears to be affected here. With, let's see, as they said, this was last week, they were finding all these kids testing positive. North Paulding High School, that's the one we heard about, where photos of students packed shoulder to shoulder brought national scrutiny. Shut down Monday and Tuesday, closed today, for a deep cleaning after 6 students and 3 staff members tested positive. The deep cleaning won't do very much the minute the kids come back in. It's all dirty again, but you have to do that for show. At the very least, 2 days is, of course, not enough to do anything about the virus that's incubating in the kids, and they'll carry it right back with them into the newly deep-cleaned school, and then all that money will be out the window. The governor sought to downplay reports of coronavirus cases at schools, saying there's definitely going to be issues when you open anything. We saw that when we open businesses. We're seeing that when we open schools. Well, yeah. He added that the state has worked with superintendents, quote, to really give them the tools that they need to open the classroom. Those would be keys. They have those. It just doesn't do anything about viruses. I'm a firm believer that the local governments know their schools better than the state government does, but they're not allowed to mandate masks or do anything about keeping their schools closed if they need to. So it's good that they know. They're just going to have to sit there and look like idiots. So, research has shown children suffer milder symptoms than adults, and I don't even know if people are buying that anymore, but they can contract the virus and spread it, putting parents, teachers, and caregivers and others at risk. That's a very brief restatement of and very low on details about what we now know about this thing. More and more evidence, not only that kids can contract it and can suffer symptoms and can suffer very severe ones at that. But that I guess there's new research that indicates that even when asymptomatic, kids apparently carry a much more significant viral load than the adults do and are essentially super spreaders, even if they're not symptomatic themselves. Philip White, a 68-year-old grandfather with serious lung and heart disease, fumed last week after learning that his granddaughter may have been exposed to coronavirus in her Cherokee County kindergarten class. They literally sent me a potential death sentence home from school, White said. Well, don't send your kids. Georgia has recorded more than 219,000 coronavirus cases since the pandemic began, including over 4,200 deaths. Over the last 4 weeks, the data has shown nearly 100,000 people tested positive for COVID-19 in the state, and nearly 1,200 people died, including a 7-year-old boy, who is, of course, a child. And, you just said that they were, virtually immune or something like that, Mr. President, right? Okay. So that's just in the last 4 weeks. 100,000 people tested positive in the last 4 weeks. 1,200 people died. Time to go back to school. There's a couple of tweets about that with that information in there from the Georgia state health authorities. You can take a look. We're done with this particular story, but it's just, one of several that I guess are circulating around the world. But we also have reports, and I didn't put one away here, but reports that New Zealand, which had just been celebrating its 100th day in a row with no new coronavirus cases, made it to 102 days. But on, I guess, the 103rd, found out that there were now 4 new cases. That's a whopping 4 new cases in New Zealand. And they're not kidding about the disease there. They had 100 days without it, and they'd like to have another 100 days without it. They're back in lockdown. Auckland, apparently, back in lockdown. I'm sure people are tired of it, but I'm sure they also know that if they can, they probably don't expect a very long lockdown to deal with an outbreak of 4. So hopefully they'll keep a lid on things and teach the rest of the world exactly how to handle this stuff if you can. I mean, it helps to be an island nation, I guess. Although my own quick survey nightly of where the hot spots are tell me that in now we're finding that if once you get it on an island, because I guess there's not that much traffic on and off of some of these islands, it gets pretty serious. Some of the hottest hot spots in terms of new cases reported on a daily basis per capita have been, very often statistical anomalies, the little microstates or tiny little islands. But now islands are very hot for this. Aruba has topped that list for the last couple of days. Not just Caribbean islands, but islands around the world, Maldives and, I don't know, Mayotte and what other, the hot spots that we've been discussing over the past couple of days. I don't even recall offhand now where the other hot spots were, but I've tweeted them around. You'll see them at night. It's not, leading the headlines anywhere because we're still talking about a relatively small population. But like, for instance, in our own states, Hawaii has largely been able to keep a lid on the worst of the numbers. They're near the bottom of the list in terms of the infection rate. But I do have to note that every American state, if it were an independent country, would rank somewhere in the top. I think Vermont, which has an anomalously low rate at the moment, would even still rank like 83rd in the world, and its infection rate is something like they have half the number of cases. The next state up the list, the 49th state, which I think is Wyoming, has more than twice the number of cases of Vermont. I don't know what they're doing there in Vermont, but they should keep it up. Part of it is being tiny. But, the picture in the United States by comparison to the rest of the world is ridiculous and getting worse by the minute, really, truly. Okay, let's see. Other stories that maybe we want to touch on here. Let's see. There's some bleak news. How about that? Why don't we add some bleak news to the situation. I just want to at least mention, if not read the actual article, from Stat News, where we've turned a couple of times in these pandemic times in the past. Winter is coming. Haha, everyone loves that. Why America's window of opportunity to beat back COVID-19 is closing. The answer is that winter is coming. Long story short here, Helen Braswell tells it very well. You should read the whole thing for the details. But basically, the big fear is the continuing outbreak of COVID-19 coinciding with the flu season and making it very difficult to know in the critical first couple of days whether the person who's feeling sick has got the flu, which is serious enough in its own right, but is not COVID-19. But they will be confused for one another, and it'll just make things more difficult and maybe make people twice as sick. Who knows if you can even contract both things at the same time, but it's going to add a real complication. And of course, as it gets cold, not only is it flu season, but that's indoor weather season. That drives, no longer can we maybe make guesses about how safe or not safe we might be eating outdoors on a patio at a restaurant somewhere. Still not a great idea, but better than eating indoors. But once we're driven back inside by the cold weather, transmission of both the flu and COVID-19 will likely increase, and we're going to find ourselves in trouble. I think you probably could have put that together for yourself, but it's an excellent report, and you should take a look at it just in case you need to become more depressed about these things. Quick hit from Guam, where we parked the USS Theodore Roosevelt not that long ago to offshore all the sailors sick with COVID-19 to try and get their sea legs under them, I guess you could say, on shore, interestingly enough, for the crew of the Roosevelt. The governor of Guam now tests positive for coronavirus. No indication that the infection is related to the stay of the sailors on Guam, unless it was passed through several hands, just because it's been weeks since all of the infected sailors from the Roosevelt have departed from Guam. But of course, they may have been passing the disease around in the community. They were supposed to be isolating, but who knows how well they did with that. Guam Governor Lou, does she say Lou? It's the governor is a woman, but the name appears anyway as Lou Leon Guerrero. So I don't know whether that's short for something, a nickname, or maybe it's who knows what kind of name it may be. But at any rate, she tested positive after she was exposed to someone who was infected last week, which would suggest that it wasn't one of the sailors. She says she's in good health, but experiencing moderate symptoms and is self-quarantined. The small North Pacific island of about 168,000 residents has confirmed 418 cases as of Monday. So we'll keep an eye on things there in Guam. That's not a horrible infection rate, but you worry about infecting relatively isolated islands and whether or not people will just pass it around among themselves. I hope to get a lid on it there in Guam, but just thought I would add that news to the pile. Some interesting additional information from yesterday's mention about Trump's weird idea about putting himself on Mount Rushmore. The Daily 202 over at the Post that has this written up by James Hohmann, which puts a particularly interesting spin on that whole story. Trump's Mount Rushmore fantasy is enabled by a Potemkin village that staffers build for him. I think we've long suspected that this was the case. Here's a note right up at the top that Mariana Alfaro has contributed to the report along with James Hohmann here. And, well, here it is. President Trump said Sunday night that etching his likeness in granite on Mount Rushmore alongside George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt sounds, this is a quote, sounds like a good idea. Not to me, it doesn't, but to him, I'm sure it does. Trump has spent a lifetime putting his name on prime real estate, but this aspiration to add his visage to perhaps the nation's foremost symbol of presidential greatness also epitomizes how his perception of his own job performance diverges so sharply from the views of most Americans. A quote in a Sunday front page story on the White House's dysfunctional coronavirus response, it is related, helps illuminate why the gulf has only grown wider as the United States surpasses 5 million cases and nears 160,000 confirmed deaths. We have, of course, bypassed that number by now. It's growing all the time. Everyone is busy trying to create a Potemkin village for him every day, said a senior administration official involved in the pandemic response. You are not supposed to see this behavior in liberal democracies that are founded on principles of rule of law, or, truth, I guess. Everyone bends over backwards to create this Potemkin village for him and for his inner circle. This is one of 41 senior officials and other people directly involved in or briefed on the response efforts, coronavirus response efforts, who gave interviews to Phil Rucker, Yasmin Abutaleb, I'm not certain if I got that emphasis right, but sorry, Yasmin, Josh Dawsey, and Bob Costa. Many spoke on a condition of anonymity to reveal confidential discussions. Staffers have concocted a positive feedback loop for the boss. I mean, this is really bad news, but I think we all suspected this, and we might as well report that it's being put on the record here. They present him with fawning media commentary and craft charts with statistics, the ones we saw in his interview with Axios, I guess, that back up the president's claim that the administration has done a great, even historically excellent job fighting the virus, my colleagues report. Legend has it that fake portable villages were built at one point to impress Russian Empress Catherine II by her former lover, Grigory Potemkin, where the name comes from, during a 1787 trip to Crimea, just to bring things back around to another trouble spot. Everybody is too scared of their own shadow to speak the truth, said another senior official involved in the response. Trump is, quote, just not oriented towards things that even in the short term look like they're involving something that's hard or negative, or that involves sacrifice or pain, because he's such a fighter, etc., added a former senior administration official. This is not the first time one of Trump's undertakings has been likened to a Potemkin village. Stephen Persky, the former chairman of New Jersey's Casino Control Commission, called the Taj Mahal Casino a Potemkin village before Trump drove the Atlantic City project into bankruptcy through mismanagement and by taking on excessive debts. Trump gave up on talks for a relief package with congressional Democrats. This is his latest high-profile failure to negotiate a major deal with the legislative branch, along with other issues such as healthcare, immigration, guns, and policing. Instead, he signed executive orders with pomp and circumstance, and they weren't even executive orders for the most part. He acknowledged during a signing ceremony on Saturday that these will not accomplish as much as legislation could, even as he overhyped what they actually will do. Meanwhile, the summer of civil unrest continued this weekend from Chicago to Portland, Oregon. On Sunday night, however, Trump tweeted this picture of himself. It's him at Mount Rushmore and positioned in such a way so that it looks like maybe sort of kind of his face is on the mountain. I mean, it's obvious that it's him live and in color, and orange is the color, and not carved in granite, but is obviously set up the picture to make it look like that. A few minutes later, the president denied a report in Sunday's New York Times that said a White House aide reached out to the South Dakota governor's office last year to find out what the process would be to add Trump's likeness to Mount Rushmore. He tweeted, "Never suggested it, although based on all of the many things accomplished during the first 3.5 years, perhaps more than any other presidency, sounds like a good idea to me." Well, good illustration of the Potemkin village working its magic on him. The Times journalists, Jonathan Martin and Maggie Haberman, expressed confidence in their reporting. Their story also revealed that South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem greeted Trump, here we mentioned this yesterday, with a 4-foot replica of Mount Rushmore, which is already a waste of money, that included his likeness when he arrived in the state last month for an Independence Day celebration. Horrible idea. Noem's efforts to ingratiate herself with Trump prompted fears among Vice President Pence's allies that she might be angling for his job. That seems like some crazy speculation. And the story says that she flew to Washington to reassure Pence 3 weeks later, which is also a huge waste of time and money. But the 48-year-old has installed a TV studio in her state capital to allow her to appear frequently on Fox News. She's been taking advice from Trump's 2016 campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, and she's scheduled to address a county Republican dinner in Iowa next month with an eye toward a potential run for president in 2024. Based on nothing, but, there you have it. That's all it takes in the Republican Party. There's some nothing. Let's do that. This is not the first time that Trump has expressed interest in adding his face to Rushmore. He mused about it in a 2017 speech, and in 2018, when Noem was a GOP member of Congress running for governor, she told the largest newspaper in her state that Trump had brought the idea up during their first meeting in the Oval Office. We heard about this one. And the fact that she, right off the bat, laughed, but he wasn't laughing. He was totally serious. Anyway, now to this point. I think this is maybe the more interesting of the... now that we've had the fantasy, here's some of the reality. But watch out for this reality. There's also the question of whether The Rock would be stable enough to add another towering set of presidential features. Tim Elfrink reports. I don't know who that is, but that's another of the Washington Post folks there, I guess, but I don't think I've read his stories. Jefferson's tribute had to be moved from its original spot. Did you know that? Due to flaws in the granite. The staff at Mount Rushmore says any further sculpting is simply impossible, which is great news, except that won't convince Trump that it's not possible. So it's mixed news, I guess. It's great news that the officials and the science-oriented people will say it just can't be done, so don't worry about it happening. It's bad news that they might be right and Trump won't believe them. Maybe it's good news politically in the sense that he would try anyway, and if they're right, and I don't have any reason to believe that they wouldn't be, he might, in trying to add his own face to Mount Rushmore, destroy the whole thing. And so for those people who are fans of having Mount Rushmore be a carved tribute to 4 great American presidents, that might be destroyed and ruined by Trump's vanity trying to add himself to it. For those who think that the carved mountain is an abomination, of course, maybe it's not so bad. I don't know. I don't know what the Native Americans would feel about seeing the thing destroyed even further. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. You might think, well, that's good. At least it will get rid of these idiots' faces, which is obviously an obvious destruction of what the mountain actually looked like. But destroying it even further, I don't know how they'd feel about that. It's a sacred site. So you could ask somebody and report back if you get a reliable response. Anyway, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of incredible. From there, the piece moves on to, I guess, other idiotic things that the president has done. But I think that covers Mount Rushmore for the moment. I just thought I would add that there's the possibility that he could totally destroy the whole monument if he disbelieves or thinks that the officials at Mount Rushmore are just saying that in order to keep him from getting what he wants. So there's some chance he could really make a fool of himself even further. All right. Other stories. Let's move on. Oh, yes. Something that Armando mentioned the other day when he was on. That would be yesterday. I was looking something up about it and found another interesting item. He mentioned, of course, that Ivanka Trump, in her financial disclosures, had noted that she had made $3.9 million from the D.C. hotel. And we discussed and have discussed at great length in the past why that's so problematic. You know, the lease very specifically says that it can't be to government officials. She is one, her father is one, but no one's doing anything about it because the law is not self-enforcing. And in the meantime, I guess this is the 3rd year in a row that she has declared taking $3.9 million in profit from the hotel. Apparently, that's the structure of her deal with her dad for this ownership of the hotel. She has some piece of it. And so when foreign governments and corporations and other interests rent out blocks of rooms there, she's getting money, he's getting money. That's all kind of old-ish news. And from this other piece of old news, an article from Politico from 2018 noting that her financial disclosure forms for 2017 noted the $3.9 million take from the hotel. There was another piece in here that I really thought was interesting. I guess this is just what rich a-holes do for themselves, but just what a cheesy thing to do, right? You know that Ivanka Trump has all sorts of outside business interests. So this year, the report of the $3.9 million from the D.C. hotel was probably overshadowed by word that she and Jared had something like $36 million in outside, maybe even more, outside income while they were serving as top government officials, and Jared being in charge, nominally in charge of everything and stealing it. This was a small ball, I guess, compared with the rest of the money that they had. But the 2017 disclosure was very interesting. This is Josh Gerstein and Darren Samuelson's report from June of 2018. And it just, in the top two paragraphs, really gets right to it. President Donald Trump's daughter and advisor, Ivanka Trump, made $3.9 million in profit last year off her stake in the Trump International Hotel, while taking at least $5 million from businesses connected to her personal brand, a then newly released financial disclosure shows. And of course, this was her stupid fashion brand that they copied all of the designs. They stole all the designs off of other folks, but that she insisted that she was divesting herself of, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the cheesy move. This one I hadn't heard about before. Ivanka also reported taking in about $2 million in 2017 in pay and severance from an entity called the Trump Payroll Corporation, the disclosure said. In other words, I guess the corporation that they use for some reason, I'm sure to cheat on taxes, to disperse payments to the beneficiaries of the Trump organization, for which she was nominally working. But can you imagine, here she is working for her quote-unquote billionaire family, taking in all this money on stupid knockoff fashion stuff, then taking over the government and taking severance. Amazing. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So in case that guy cut off, all I was saying at the end was how amazing it is and what a cheesy thing. Imagine having, I guess it's her family's money, so it's not entirely like she's taking it out of anybody else's hands. I don't think they pay that many other people for working for their company. But, just imagine all the windfall money that she was enjoying already by that point to, I don't know. It's really, who knows? I guess they're all greedy bastards, so it doesn't make any difference that you're taking money away from other beneficiaries of the Trump organization, because they're all just Trumps, and who cares about them? But I don't know. There's just something galling about saying, well, I'm switching jobs this year by necessity. I'm going to go take over the United States government and advise the president of the United States on every stupid move he's going to make. But I'm leaving behind the millions and millions of dollars I have been getting from sitting on my ass and doing nothing. But so I'm going to need severance here. A $2 million severance for leaving, sitting around and collecting money and moving to a new job, which really doesn't require any severance, in other words. But, ordinarily when you're leaving a company, whatever, if you have a severance pay deal, you have a severance pay deal. But there's no daylight between individual Trumps and the Trump organization. And the idea of taking severance when everybody knows what you're moving on to, which is grifting off of the U.S. government and other governments, what's the severance for? Because there's money and I want to have it. So that tells you a little bit of, nothing new about Ivanka, but just, or won't change your opinion of Ivanka, except to be able to point at her for different reasons, say, you really are a cheesy bastard after all. So to the extent that that is necessary for you to make your day, I thought I would share that one with you. Let's see. Other interesting news. Another thing that Armando made mention of was his reflection on the stock market and its weird status with Donald Trump, and just basically the weird status it's been imbued with for decades now. And maybe, I don't know, I always point to the sort of the Reagan era as the beginning of this, but who knows for how long that they were. It's just when I took notice of it, when 24-hour news channels started showing stock tickers all the time, boosting the image of the stock market as an important source of news by itself. Anyway, but Armando was pointing out that it just really bears no relationship to the reality of what's going on economically in this country. And he's got a supporter here. And I don't know, I guess maybe it won't surprise a lot of you that Armando and Jamie Dimon end up on the same page here, although I'm sure they would disavow one another if given the opportunity, but maybe not. This reported by CNN just yesterday, so I thought I'd grab it just to supplement his comments and make room for some of our own. Jamie Dimon, the stock market doesn't reflect America's pain. And I think that's true, and maybe he will tell us a little bit about why. Paul LaMonica, writing this up for CNN Business, the stock market's huge run-up in recent months doesn't capture everyday Americans' pain. That's why the government and big business should act to help ease the burden on the least fortunate, said J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon in an interview with CNN Business. I have no idea whether he's serious about that, but it's a thing that somebody like Dimon would say from time to time to make it look like he cares about people. When you have 13 million people out of work, and I think we have more than that, and you've got people suffering and small business suffering, that's far more important than the vicissitudes of Wall Street, Dimon told CNN's Christine Romans. That's what we should worry about. And I guess maybe he's looking to, I don't know, maybe have a good time talking. Well, I guess there's no Democratic National Convention. He might otherwise be looking forward to hobnobbing at the political conventions this year, probably both of them. But that's kind of out of the question now. But I'm sure he's got some other agenda. Dimon said businesses must do more to help low-income and minority Americans. That's why he joined a new initiative that will have no low-income or minority Americans involved in it, I'm sure. A new initiative to work with educational institutions and nonprofits in the New York area to provide more job opportunities for Black, Latinx, as they use, but we say Latine, and Asian workers. He said that government alone cannot solve society's biggest problems. Interesting. Sort of thing you would say at Davos, and I guess he's not going, or it's over for the year, or I don't remember where we are with Davos, or maybe it's canceled for coronavirus, so he's going to say it here in New York. The pace is quick. The world has become more complex, and the problems of education, jobs, infrastructure, immigration, if you fix these things, we will have a far more just society, Dimon told Romans. Sure. I mean, we would. It just depends on how you fix them. Dimon, along with City University of New York Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, spoke with Romans last week about the launch of a New York Jobs CEO Council. I don't know if this is the initiative or it's another one. A coalition of 27 business leaders, and you know how they are at fixing stuff, that is pledging to hire 100,000 New Yorkers by 2030. Don't break your backs, guys. And provide apprenticeships for 25,000 CUNY, City University of New York, students. Dimon is one of the council's co-chairs, along with EY Global Chairman and CEO Carmine DeCibio, IBM CEO Arvind Krishna, McKinsey & Company, Global Managing Partner Kevin Sneeder, and Accenture CEO Julie Sweet. The goal of the council, according to Matos Rodriguez, is to build new connections for his school students, many of whom are the first in the family to go to college. It sounds like a nice idea. I don't think we need to really continue with this, except to maybe we can touch on the the highlights of the different sections to get some sense of what does Dimon do with the rest of his time. Next section of the piece gets the subheader here. Diamond hopeful that worst of pandemic will soon be over. That's nice. He hopes that. Then the note, will be fine. What does that mean? Diamond did not tip his hand when asked about what might happen for the bank, his bank, JP Morgan, after the presidential and congressional elections in November either. Basically, though, I guess the message being, we'll be fine. We're extremely rich. Then he talks about his own health, and that's the end of it. So those of you who are Jamie Dimon watchers, you might want to check in on that. Otherwise, don't bother. And I think probably we're mostly in the don't bother category. But interesting point. I guess he doesn't get to the why of the stock market not reflecting Americans' pain, just that it doesn't. I guess you have to come to the show to find that out. And we, of course, decided here, that is, I decided, and I said it, and none of you could stop me from saying it, that a lot of it, well, it certainly doesn't reflect the reality of the day-to-day living in the economic situation that most of us are in. Why, when the jobs report looks so terrible, does the stock market skyrocket? We've discussed that. Jobs are a cost center. No one wants to pay payroll if they don't have to. So when they find out, hey, lots of people are shedding payroll, and we'll have an excuse to shed payroll too. After all, everyone's laying everyone off. Even if I hadn't been thinking about layoffs, I'll start thinking about layoffs. If all of my competitors or people in my sector or other people who are competing for investment dollars, they don't even have to be in my sector anymore. If they're competing for the dollars of investors, and cutting payroll and thereby cutting costs and making it look like you might get a larger return on your invested money, I need to do the same. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that everybody's laying everybody off, and I won't look any more terrible than anybody else. Everybody's doing it in order to scoop up some more of that money for myself. Oh, yeah, and also my investors. Anyway, just thought I would bring that up. Lots more other fun things to touch on. Let's see. One more bit of coronavirus news. Perhaps we'll cram in before searching a little bit deeper into our pocket here. Happened to see this one go by while the show was already underway in Bloomberg by Anna Edney, Josh Wingrove, and Robert Langreth. This prognosis. Most Americans won't be able to get a coronavirus vaccine until well into 2021. I don't think anyone was really expecting it there. But the president's been running around promising somehow that we would have one. Also in the news today, note to self off, see if I can dig up the news reports of it. I didn't put it aside, but Twitter was passing around the note that the Russians have been claiming that they've come up with a coronavirus vaccine. I did see the other day, too, that there were some human trials pushing forward some very aggressive human trials in Saudi Arabia, where they're very aggressive with their humans. And they found 50,000 volunteers, which, they behead people in public in Saudi Arabia still. So, not sure exactly on what basis they were gathering their volunteers, but they got them. We'll see how they do with that. Russia says it's got a vaccine. I mean, I'm sure that Putin would love to be the one to announce that they were first to a vaccine, even if they don't have one or even if it's not safe. And I did see the comment along with the announcement, somebody mentioning, now I kind of can see the anti-vaxxers' point. After all, if we're all supposed to now say, the vaccine came from Russia and it may or may not have real science behind it. It might just be Putin saying that. It might just be Putin saying, here's an awesome opportunity to make things worse for the United States and kill a lot of them and have them do it to themselves. I'd be suspicious of a Russian vaccine anyway. But this is about the American-developed vaccines that may be developed under similar circumstances of Trump wanting to be the one to brag whether or not the damn thing is real or safe. But even if it works, the first doses, our subheader tells us, will likely be reserved for health workers and others at high risk, and that makes good sense. But even if the most optimistic projections hold true, and a COVID-19 vaccine is cleared for U.S. use in November, and by cleared we mean under normal circumstances with the real scientists saying, yeah, we should go forward with this thing, versus Trump just ordering it to happen. Even if it's cleared for use in November, the vast majority of Americans won't be able to get the shot until spring or summer next year at the earliest. That likely timeline, based on interviews and remarks from top specialists, including Anthony Fauci of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, mean businesses, school children, and families will continue to wait, which is okay with me. But in an interview, Fauci, who has also been involved with the White House's Operation Warp Speed vaccine program, not a particularly creative name for it, but not awful, said it may take well into 2021 for vaccines to reach much of the general public. And then, of course, it runs into the problems of production and bottlenecks, literally bottlenecks, that we've been talking about, manufacturing the glass vials necessary to hold the vaccines, manufacturing enough syringes to administer the vaccines, and then distributing all of those nationwide will cause some significant delays as well. But just so you know, that's the reality of it, even though politically speaking, I'm sure if the Trump administration, I'm sure they're thinking about this, if they can announce the vaccine and do it before Election Day, some critical mass of voters will vote based on the idea that the vaccine is available because they heard it on the news, and not the reality that the vaccine is nowhere near reaching them. But I suppose if the vaccine is available and effective and has been developed and is on its way to the public, there aren't going to be a whole lot of people that say, well, I personally haven't received it, so therefore screw Donald Trump. You're probably going to vote for or against Donald Trump based on something else. But it wouldn't hurt to be able to get those headlines. So I'm sure that's what he's going for. Other news, not that I know of, directly related to coronavirus, but directly related to things that we are interested in this country, and the things that Joan McCarter may be interested in, although I'm hoping that she's not just having to watch this rather than come on the show, but she might be interested in watching this. The en banc rehearing of Michael Flynn's case, I guess, happens today. I just happened to see Marty Lederman tweeting about it earlier and offering up his own take on things. If you want to know, he says, what this morning's D.C. Circuit en banc Flynn hearing is about. Well, for one thing, you could listen to it yourself. It is streaming and began streaming at 9:30 this morning, which is why I was a little concerned with people's attentions being elsewhere. But here's my take, he says, on what went wrong with the panel opinion. And he puts it together for Just Security. And I'll take a brief scan through it. Is it a very lengthy thing? It always is. Whenever Marty Lederman has something to say, he dives into the details. But it's of some interest here, so maybe we'll give it some time. This morning, in a stunning decision, this is his take on it back in June of 2020 when the the 3-judge panel's decision came out. In a stunning decision that broke from usual standards of judicial process and self-restraint, D.C. Circuit Judges Naomi Rao and Karen LaCraft Henderson granted Michael Flynn's preemptive mandamus petition to shut down Judge Emmett Sullivan's consideration of the government's motion to dismiss the criminal charges against Flynn. You remember how that stood? The court ordered Judge Sullivan to grant the government's Rule 48A motion to dismiss the charges before the judge even considers the merits of that motion, apparently in order to prevent him from convening a hearing on it. Judge Robert Wilkins dissented. The oral argument gave little hint that this was coming. Indeed, Judge Henderson repeatedly noted both that Judge Sullivan hadn't even had the chance to rule yet, and that Flynn could remedy any injury by appealing if and when Sullivan denied the government's motion and entered a judgment of conviction, both of which made mandamus a singularly inappropriate remedy here. Do you all remember what mandamus is? Mandamus is essentially a higher court ordering a government official, do your job and do it this way. And in this case, the official in question is Federal District Judge Emmett Sullivan. You must grant the government's motion to dismiss the criminal charges against Flynn. You'll remember, of course, that didn't pan out because there was an appeal brought immediately of the 3-judge panel's ruling in this appeals case, and came from the appeal, actually, I think, do I remember correctly, initiated by Sullivan, or at least requested by Sullivan, and they will be rehearing it en banc, the entire D.C. Circuit sitting today, right now, rehearing this thing, and all indications are that they will reverse the panel's decision. Why would they do that? Well, this is where Marty gets into the details. As I'll explain below, and maybe we won't read all the way through it, the panel's decision is plainly wrong. That's why. And the en banc Court of Appeals will almost certainly reverse it if the case reaches that stage. It did, and it's happening now. But it now, back in June anyway, stands as the law of the D.C. Circuit. And everyone who cares about the state of the federal courts should take notice. Before explaining why I believe it's clear that the panel erred in several important respects, I should stress once again that I don't really care much. That's not going to help us get interested, is it, Marty? And I think you shouldn't either. Oh, well, maybe we shouldn't. Whether Michael Flynn is ultimately convicted for willfully making false material statements in his January 24, 2017 interview with 2 FBI agents, or whether Flynn ever spends any time in prison, something that's very unlikely in light of the president's pardon power, so don't get your hopes up. In part, this is because, as I've previously recounted, many acts of malfeasance by other actors in this affair, from the president to the attorney general, Barr in this case, to former FBI Director Comey, have been more damaging to governmental functions and norms than Flynn's false statements were. And in part, it's because Flynn's lies to the FBI weren't remotely his own most egregious actions before or after January 24th, 2017. Indeed, they weren't even the most damaging criminal offenses he's committed. Whatever one thinks of Flynn's misconduct, and whether it merits criminal punishment, however, and whatever you think of the damage Attorney General Barr has done to the reputation for the even-handed administration of justice in the executive branch, including in the Flynn case itself, in today's decision, Judges Rao and Henderson, that was back in June, have touched on a new nerve by damaging the integrity of the judicial process. And that raises an entirely different order of concern. And in an update he adds here, Encore is, he says, and links to it, right that the decision is obviously redolent of Bush v. Gore, in that the higher court in each case astonishingly told the lower court to just flat out stop what it was doing. In Flynn, as in Bush v. Gore, and a quote from Oren Kerr here, you would have expected that the lower court to be able to rule on the motion. A motion to dismiss was filed, and the district court was considering it and wanted to hear different perspectives before ruling, as judges often do, right? Judges get motions, consider them, have hearings, and rule on them all the time. That's the way it normally works. Instead, the D.C. Circuit concluded that the district judge couldn't even consider the question. Merely having a hearing on how to decide the motion is harm, the court concluded, and the court didn't trust the district court to approach the law the right way if they let him proceed in the normal way. So remarkably, the D.C. Circuit just took control and told the lower court to stop it. There are, of course, 3 major errors, says Marty, at the heart of Judge Rao's opinion. Might as well run through them. The first error in that opinion is that the opinion doesn't make any effort at all to explain how Flynn, the party petitioning for mandamus, lacks adequate alternative means to remedy his injury if Judge Sullivan denies the motion to dismiss. Of course, that's because Flynn does have such a remedy, and you're not supposed to if mandamus is your alternative. He can appeal if and when the judge denies the motion and enters a judgment of conviction against him, something that may well not even happen. The panel majority doesn't suggest otherwise, and that should be the beginning and end of this mandamus position, as Judge Henderson herself has explained. Mandamus is inappropriate in the presence of an obvious means of review, direct appeal from final judgment, and cites the source for that, but it's kind of obvious, right? I mean, that's how the law normally works. If you make a motion to dismiss and the motion to dismiss is denied and you think that there's grounds to reverse that, you appeal it. And that's it. There's no reason why mandamus had to be ordered in this case. Not at this stage. The panel, however, decided to grant the petition anyway based upon an alleged injury to the Department of Justice if Judge Sullivan so much as holds a hearing on the government's motion to dismiss. As Judge Wilkins emphasizes, however, in the dissent, the government hasn't petitioned for mandamus relief, and so, remember that was Flynn who asked for it, the government hasn't petitioned for mandamus relief, so any particular injury it might suffer as a result of Judge Sullivan's hearing is irrelevant to whether Flynn has other means of remedying his own injuries, and thus whether Flynn is entitled to extraordinary mandamus relief. The opinion for the court insists that our court has squarely rejected Judge Wilkins' argument that a court may not issue a mandamus petition where it's not necessary to remedy the petitioner's alleged harm, but that assertion about what our court has previously done is simply made up. The Court of Appeals hasn't ever rejected the argument, squarely or otherwise, because, for good reason, no one has ever before had the audacity to offer it as the basis for mandamus relief. The only D.C. Circuit opinion the majority cites, Cobell versus Norton, a 2003 case. That case allegedly squarely rejected Judge Wilkins' argument. Well, that was one in which the government sought a writ of mandamus to remedy its own injuries. The majority points to a footnote in Cobell, but in that footnote, the court merely held that the government didn't have to file its mandamus petition separate from its, this is technical stuff, interlocutory appeals, rather than, as it had done in Cobell, a single filing. The majority cites a 1943 Supreme Court case, Ex parte Republic of Peru, in case you're wondering, but that's inapposite too. As Judge Wilkins explains, the court there decided that a petitioning party, the Republic of Peru, had a basis for immediate relief to remedy its own injuries. Thus, Judge Wilkins is right. The majority cites no cases in which a court has concluded that a petitioner has satisfied her burden to show no other adequate means to attain her sought-after relief based on the absence of alternative avenues of relief for a different party that did not petition the court for the writ. That is a weird circumstance of this particular case. And to rely, long story short there is, the judges on the three-judge panel claim to worry about damage being done to the Department of Justice. They are the ones who recommended that the charges be dismissed, and if they're not dismissed, they'll be injured. Maybe, but the question in front of us now is what to do with this mandamus petition, and they didn't file it. So we're not interested in whether the Justice Department gets injured in this. The party in front of us is Flynn, and he's not injured by denying mandamus. It's kind of a bizarre thing that they did, which is why he thinks this thing would be reversed. All right, well, there's 2 and 3 still left to go here, but I'm wondering if maybe this is just too full of legal jargon to wade through in the time still left to us here before our next break. But in case you like to wade into that sort of material, well, then after our show wraps up, you might still be able to catch some more of the hearing. I don't know how long they're scheduled for, but usually they only give them an hour. So maybe you'll be able to catch or tune into or follow on Twitter the people who are perhaps following the live stream of the hearing for an indication of which way they think the full panel review will go. But it certainly sounds like Marty Lederman, at least back in June, thought, and hasn't updated it since, so probably still thinks that they will reverse. I'm just curious if we can get a flavor for the rest of the 2 points here. Point 2 began that even if a court of appeals could grant a mandamus petition based upon an injury to a party, here the executive branch, that hasn't asked for mandamus relief on its own, something the law doesn't allow, this would hardly be the ideal case in which to do so, because contrary to the majority opinion in the 3-judge panel, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice wouldn't be injured by Judge Sullivan's unexceptional decision to convene a hearing on the government's motion to dismiss. That sounds like it was pretty well covered, I thought, in the introduction. The third particular reason here, ultimately the panel's majority decision to grant the mandamus petition is predicated upon its view that there's simply no good reason for Judge Sullivan to hold a hearing because there's an, quote, absence of any legitimate basis to question the presumption of regularity. That's an important point. In the reasons that DOJ has offered for its motion to dismiss the charges against Flynn. Presumption of regularity is something we kind of come back to from a lot of angles. on the show and have for a while. Even if that were true, he goes on, i.e., even if the proper ruling on the motion to dismiss were obvious and irrefutable, that wouldn't even be sufficient grounds for issuing a writ of mandamus to preclude a judge from even having a hearing on a motion and deciding it himself. If that were enough, courts of appeal would constantly be confronting and granting mandamus petitions to require district courts to decide pending motions in a particular way rather than never doing so until today. It's a pretty good point, and I think probably best summarized here by saying, you're supposed to let the process play out. But just as Republicans are always looking to short-circuit court proceedings, to preempt juries of your peers from deciding, for instance, on how much damages someone should be awarded in a civil suit, like with tort reform liability, or the stand your ground laws. You can't even have this person have a day in court to decide whether or not they were entitled to defend themselves. We're just going to short-circuit it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, where to turn next? I think we'll jump out of the Flynn preview here, and I'll remind you, Marcy Wheeler, Empty Wheel on Twitter, appears to be watching or listening in on the live stream of the Flynn hearing and following with her eye on these things, and probably a great direction to turn. A lot of good court reporters also doing the same, but our own Netroots-based reporter who's just been following this case and other similar proceedings for a long time. You might want to join in on her review of things. Speaking of court cases and the way the Trump administration uses and abuses the court system, I've got this brief report from The Hill. Brings us up to date on I guess the latest instance in which they'll just file a suit about anything. Harper Neidig, Neidig, the reporter on this piece. Trump questions Manhattan DA investigation prompting tax return subpoena. You may remember the story wherein ordinarily things would have been settled for us going forward by the Supreme Court, but as I've described to you before, Republican approach to pretty much all litigation, and in particular Trump's approach to litigation, is you just say, you pretend to misunderstand. I don't understand. Why does this ruling apply to me? Well, it has your name on it and it orders you directly to do this thing. I know, but does it really? You'll have to show me where. It's on page 1. Well, bring me into court and show me, and let's burn time off of the clock having you do that. That's what's going on here. President Trump's legal team on Monday questioned the Manhattan District Attorney's suggestion last week that it is pursuing a broad investigation into, quote, possible extensive and protracted criminal conduct at the Trump Organization, which is likely true. In their latest court filing challenging a subpoena for the president's tax returns, Trump's lawyers pushed back after the New York prosecutor last week cited a trio of news articles detailing alleged fraud at Trump's businesses as a justification for the investigation. Trump is arguing that the subpoena is overly broad and intended to illegally, quote, harass the president, while the district attorney's office is asking a federal judge to dismiss Trump's latest legal challenge against the subpoena. At no point in this motion or in any public filing has the district attorney ever claimed that the topics discussed in these reports were the impetus for his investigation or are otherwise related to it, Trump's lawyers wrote on Monday. Lobbing incendiary articles into the record may be sufficient to trigger a breathless news cycle, but such misdirection falls woefully short of what is needed for dismissal. If anything, it shows that the district attorney is still fishing for a way to justify his harassment of the president, which really, to this point, hasn't even happened. A spokesman for the Manhattan District Attorney declined to comment. Why, I'm not sure, but that's what they did. Trump is raising new legal objections to the subpoena, which is seeking 8 years of tax returns and other financial documents from his accounting firm, after the Supreme Court rejected his argument that the president has special immunity from state grand jury investigations. Last week, in response to the president's new claim that the subpoena is invalid because of its breadth, the district attorney's office pointed to news articles reporting that Trump and his businesses may have engaged in fraud. So what's happening here, just to decode all of this, the Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, for whatever reason, decides to subpoena Trump's tax records as part of some kind of investigation. Trump opposes it and goes to court to sue to quash the subpoenas, saying that I am absolutely immune from these subpoenas. I have all sorts of crazy, stupid immunities, some of which I made up, some of which are borrowed from other areas of law. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. They appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court, at which point the Supreme Court said, no, you don't have special immunity from state grand jury investigations. At which point and I think all along, the plan was to then say, all right, well, I oppose the subpoenas not because I have special immunity, which you claim I don't, but I still claim I do. But I oppose them because they're overly broad. At which point, really the courts at that point should have said, that's an objection that needed to be timely made along with your other filing. You didn't bring it up and we're not going to hear it. But he's the president, and so you have to take out, supposedly the president, you have to take everything seriously. So, at this point, they'll appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, maybe, I don't know whether they'll bother to take it. We'll say, no, it's not overly broad. And if he were still president at that point and Vance decided to go ahead with the subpoenas, he would sue and say, I'm blocking it now because they're not sufficiently broad, let's say. I don't know. He'd come up with something. Or if it's not breadth, width. That's not a thing that there is about subpoenas. Well, it's not thick enough. The paper isn't heavy enough stock. Just make something else up and force every court to say, no, that's ridiculous. That's not even a thing you can object to. But to take 2 years to do it. All right, back to the article here. It was the first time that the district attorney had hinted at the broad nature of the investigation into Trump's finances. The prosecutor's office had previously only cited the hush money scheme involving payments in 2016 to 2 women who claimed to have had affairs with the president before he came into office. Trump's lawyers argued on Monday that the allegations and innuendo in the news articles cited last week are still not enough to justify the subpoena. If the DA convened the grand jury in order to investigate allegations discussed in these articles, he could have said so, they wrote in their court filing, but the bare fact that there were public allegations of possible criminal activity, which is all these citations show, provides no insight into whether the grand jury is in fact investigating them and whether they were a basis for issuing this subpoena. The district attorney has accused Trump's lawyers of trying to stall the subpoena following the defeat at the Supreme Court, which is true. What the president's lawyers are seeking here is delay. Carrie Dunn, a lawyer with the DA's office, told the court last month. I think that's the entire strategy. Every day that goes by, the president wins the type of absolute temporary immunity he's been seeking in this case, even though he's lost on that claim before every court that's heard it, including now the Supreme Court. That's the end of the article, but I think we got the gist of things there. The DA is pretty sure that they're right. I'm pretty sure the DA is right about that one. But Trump is, in this country, you get your day in court. So he'll just make up a claim and make it in court, and the court will reject it, and then he'll appeal to the state appeals court, and then the state Supreme Court, and then from the state Supreme Court possibly to the U.S. Supreme Court, and be rejected again, and then come up with a different claim. That's what they're seeking to do here. And off the top of my head, I'd say we're powerless against it. Damn, that sucks. Oh well, that's too bad. That's Well, it really is bad news. We probably should have impeached the guy, and we had the choice, or removed him, obviously. We did impeach him, and whether or not doing so on narrow grounds was a great idea, we'll never know, except that we know, and they would have rejected broader grounds as well, but at least we would have them on the record for it. I don't know. There's really not much else you can say about that. All right. Another thing that I mentioned the other day, and I included a link for those of you who read the links in Scott's roundups, but I thought this made an interesting point all by itself, and we'll roll it out here, so long as I'm not certain what's going on and with Joan, and I don't think she's still on vacation, but you never know. She'd just be getting very busy with things around the office. I'm not certain what craziness might have distracted her, or maybe it was nothing, and it was just, oh, damn, I forgot today was Tuesday. That could be it. And it's okay, and maybe we'll have her on another day, or just roll on with our topics here. It's great when we manage to get her for a few minutes, and we'll live, we miss her, but that's that, and we move on with other stories while we're waiting. Extortion as a national policy. Does this sound like a good idea to you? It sounds like a good idea to Donald Trump. What's going on here? This I made mention of yesterday, but didn't give you very much in the way of details. President Trump demands key money from a TikTok sale to Microsoft, or he'll ban TikTok in the U.S. Rob Berger covering this for Forbes. What's interesting about this, besides the fact that, of course, he's extorting money from American corporations, is the practice to which he's referring here, and you'll see why in Rob's description. On Monday, and this would have been, so this is written August 4th, so last Monday, President Trump unabashedly told reporters, and I told you he wasn't embarrassed by this thing, because he's dumb and he doesn't know what he's getting into, told reporters that a very substantial portion of a sale price of TikTok to Microsoft would go to the Treasury. He called it key money. Why? What is that? Well, okay. The alternative, we'll get to what key money is in a minute. The alternative to the key money thing, Trump will shut down TikTok in the U.S. on September 15th if they don't sell to Microsoft. I don't know whether he particularly demands that it be Microsoft, but that it be an American company. Now, key money. This is where we get to Trump's brainworms and his penchant for illegal dealings, but illegal dealings as he conducted them in the 1980s. That's why I refer to the brainworms. Key money is a dated term used in real estate transactions. Should not surprise you. It's money a prospective tenant would pay under the table to a landlord, building manager, or even another tenant, in some cases, to secure a lease. Think of a middle school bully demanding another student's lunch money in exchange for safe passage. The problem with Mr. Trump's demand, among many, is that it overshadows an issue of national security. You're not just stealing money, you're doing so in the realm of national security and using the president's authority to do it. It suggests that he cares more about the art of the deal than the security of our children's data, which is, of course, the case. TikTok and data security have been a growing concern for many. TikTok is a social media platform that enables its users to create and share short videos. It's popular among children and young adults. Launched in 2016, it has 800 million active users worldwide, and 41% of its users are between the age of 16 and 24. It has 165 million users in the U.S. Late last year, it was reported that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, remember them, CFIUS, and remember how that was the bulwark against things happening like the Trump campaign's claim that the sale of Uranium One was something that Hillary Clinton had single-handedly rigged in order to favor various Russian oligarchs. But that sales like this are reviewed by a large panel that makes it impossible for one person to steer them for just that reason. But let's ignore all that because we don't know how government works. And anyway, it gets in the way of our narrative. All right. Well, when CFIUS began reviewing ByteDance's acquisition of Musical.ly, I guess what they would call themselves, it's musical.ly, the app that was rebranded the app was rebranded into TikTok. Okay, so background here. CFIUS began reviewing ByteDance's acquisition of Musical.ly, the app that was rebranded into TikTok. It was once Musical.ly, now it's TikTok. ByteDance is the Chinese company headquartered in Beijing that owns TikTok. The concern? Chinese law could force TikTok to hand over data on U.S. users to the Chinese government. That could be a real thing and a real concern, right? Given China's history of corporate espionage and theft of data from U.S. citizens, the concern is well-founded. Just last month, China targeted COVID-19 research. I think we remember hearing about that on the show. One has to wonder if there's anything China wouldn't do to gain a competitive advantage over any other nation or people. That's a cultural swat at them, and I guess you could remain open to question about whether it's a valid one or not. But, our culture's as valid as theirs as well. Why not? Take that swipe. It's an interesting concern about which we don't spend enough time thinking. The concern over China and TikTok's data is widespread. As reported in the Washington Post, several countries are alarmed over China's potential access to TikTok's data. This summer, India banned the app, although the ban occurred after 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a clash with Chinese troops. It's a pretty big difference. Australia is investigating the app's potential security threat. The European Union's data protection regulators have launched a probe into TikTok's privacy policies. Other countries raising varying degrees of concern include Japan, Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan. In the U.S., concerns over China's access to TikTok's data cross party lines. Yesterday, Senator Chuck Schumer, not really yesterday, but last week, said that a U.S. company should buy TikTok so everyone can keep using it and your data is safe. Okay, here's the tweet saying so. Here's what Microsoft is saying. This past weekend, Microsoft issued a statement on its blog. According to the statement, Microsoft is prepared to continue exploring a purchase of TikTok in the U.S. following discussions between its CEO, Satya Nadella, and Mr. Trump. It also said it is committed to acquiring TikTok, subject to, among other things, providing proper economic benefits to the United States, including the United States Treasury. It's unclear if this refers to the tax revenue that would naturally flow from the deal. Given the statement's use of the term proper, one might infer that Microsoft has no intention of paying the government key money. The statement also noted that Microsoft and ByteDance provided notice of their intent to explore a deal to CFIUS. The deal would cover TikTok service in the U.S., Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, this next section, Trump and the art of the deal, I guess is going to explain the rest of this. Not yesterday, but last week, Mr. Trump said the Treasury would receive a very substantial portion of the deal. A very substantial portion of that sale price is going to have to come into the United States Treasury, or the Treasury of the United States, he says, because we're making it possible for this deal to happen. Right now, they don't have any rights unless we give it to them. He likened his demand to key money. It's a little bit like the landlord-tenant, because that's all he knows. Without a lease, the tenant has nothing. So they pay what's called key money, or they pay something. And in case there was any doubt about the carrot and stick Mr. Trump is extending to TikTok, TikTok will close down on September 15th unless Microsoft or somebody else is able to buy it and work out an appropriate deal so the Treasury gets a lot of money. A lot of money. This is his brainwormed statement about the deal. And I mean, you'd be, like he's saying, the author is trying to normalize things here by saying, well, maybe they mean the Treasury will get a lot of money, like tax money. TikTok will make a lot of money for Microsoft. Microsoft will pay its taxes, which they don't do. And the Treasury will get a lot of money. And they won't. But bringing up key money, like intentionally, as they said, it's an antiquated term and an illegal practice. Like, Trump is explaining everything, right? What did he say? It's a little bit like the landlord-tenant. Without a lease, the tenant has nothing. That's true. So they pay what's called key money, or they pay something. He doesn't finish the thought, but I guess the thinking is, well, so you pay key money so that the landlord will grant a lease to the tenant. no. It's true that without a lease, the tenant has nothing to fall back on in terms of asserting his own rights. But so does the landlord have nothing really much except, I guess, possession of the deed. I mean, it's something, but it's a very blunt instrument. But a lease is worked out between landlord and tenant so that they both know what their rights and obligations are if should the tenant agree to occupy the premises and pay, yes, but not key money, rent. Rent is what gets paid so that a landlord grants a lease to the tenant, not key money. Key money, does he go on to explain it? As I understand it, the key money is, well, look, the rent for the apartment is $1,000 a month. I could rent it to anybody. Anybody. And as a matter of fact, I have 10 people interested in it. So, for instance, I could rent it to you for $1,000 a month. I could rent it to this guy for $1,000 or any of these 10 people for $1,000 a month. But what I'll do is I'll guarantee, how do I know? How can I guarantee to you, or how can you guarantee for yourself that I'll rent it to you for $1,000 a month instead of these other 10? You pay me key money. Give me another $1,000 once, twice, every month. I don't know, whatever he thinks he can demand. Give me $10,000. Give me a $10,000 payment under the table and I will grant the lease to you. It's a bribe. That's what it is. I mean, I don't know why key money sounds better than bribe, I guess, but the key money, are you going to get the keys to the place or not? Well, you will if you pay me $10,000. It's a bribe under the table. There's nothing to do with securing legal rights for anybody. It's an admission that probably, at this point, an admission that was something he was doing all along and stealing the money, and he just thought everybody did it. And, I'm sure everybody in Manhattan probably did do it, but now maybe less so than ever before, and it was never legal, and he doesn't realize what kind of jeopardy he's putting himself in, except no one will prosecute him for it because he'll say, I was just talking about generally, and you got to come up with better proof that he was taking key money than that. And I'm sure the proof exists somewhere, and maybe Cy Vance could pursue it, but it's the least of his crimes. Probably. Anyway, so he just lays this thing out like, I used to do that all the time, which is an idiotic thing to say. All right, so here instead he just vaguely refers to money going to the Treasury rather than to his pockets. But he would use the same leverage. And here I guess saying TikTok is going to get shut down. On September 15th, I'm going to ban TikTok, so he says. I don't know whether he's really got it together. I don't know what kind of executive powers he's got to do it. I don't have the time to examine that one today, but maybe I'll look around and see what there is. We'll share it some other day. But I'm going to shut them down, which means they go out of business, which means they're without value at that point. However, we could keep them operating and generating revenue for somebody, and if that might be Microsoft, it could be somebody else. An American company could buy them and make money with them. If they do, we could just make money off of taxes. It's interestingly, again, in a backhanded way, you could normalize what he's saying and pretend he has a point. Microsoft doesn't pay its taxes, uses all sorts of corporate loopholes to avoid paying its real fair share. I think we're all pretty well aware of that. So we're going to bring in revenue to the Treasury through some sort of illegal distortion. But hey, it's going to the Treasury, so what's your problem with it? It's a little bit like the same gambit that he was using with the fake executive orders the other day. Who's going to stand in the way of this money coming into the Treasury? Except that I don't believe that it really just lands and stays in the Treasury. He's got mechanisms, quasi-legal mechanisms for piping it back out of the Treasury. We're going to have every government function from now on take place at Trump Doral. And you got to rent it from me. I order it to happen. Until somebody stops me, that's what I'm going to order to happen. But here he can point to saying it's going to the Treasury, and that's a good thing. Now, it's not unusual, it continues, the article does, for the Treasury to collect fees as part of a CFIUS review. The fees are based on the size of the transaction, but cannot exceed $300,000, according to the Washington Post. In this regard, they are similar to the fees collected as part of a Hart-Scott-Rodino filing. There's an antiquated group of names for you, which reviews proposed mergers for antitrust concerns. Those fees are currently capped at $280,000. Mr. Trump's demands appear to go far beyond the $300,000 CFIUS review fee. At a White House media briefing on Monday, Trump said that the United States, quote, should get a very large percentage of that price of the sale, not taxes, and not taxes on the sale. It would come from the sale. Whatever that number is, it would come from the sale, the president said, which nobody else would be thinking about but me. But that's the way I think. And it's true. Nobody would be thinking about it because you were a corrupt landlord in the 1980s, and everybody has either abandoned or forgotten or buried that practice, but not you, because you still live in the 80s and you are as corrupt today as you were then. Extortion as policy is the next segment here. Mr. Trump's comments raise alarming questions about U.S. policy. Our government is right to be concerned about data privacy and the Chinese government's willingness to steal data on U.S. citizens, but Mr. Trump's demand for a large percentage of a sale feels more like a shakedown, because it is one. Pay up or else. It's a view shared by others, and here some embedded tweets that express that they do, in fact, share that view. Let's see. Santiago Meyer is the first tweeter here. Why would the U.S. Treasury receive any percentage of the TikTok sale? That's quite literally extortion. Either you pay me or you don't get to operate in the country. Dr. Jack Brown, doctor of what? I don't know, but saying Trump is muscling TikTok to sell, and he wants the Treasury Department to get a cut of the sale. These are extortion or mob tactics. Trump is positioning himself to get his own personal cut of the sale. Matt Navarra, who has a blue check by his name, maybe he's a reporter for TechCrunch, because that's the link that he includes here. This sounds a lot like extortion by Trump. TechCrunch article saying Trump calls TikTok a hot brand, demands a chunk of its sale price. It's the kind of demand one could imagine a dictator in a third world country making before allowing food and medical supplies into the country. We used to go to war over things like that. More importantly, Mr. Trump's demand for a cut turns attention away from what's really at stake, the safety and security of U.S. citizens, including our children. Won't somebody please think of the children? Rob Berger says he will. Whether or not that's what he's really thinking about, I don't know. But yeah, very good point. I was kind of curious about the TechCrunch view of this, actually written in that piece by Alex Wilhelm. Trump calls TikTok a hot brand, demands a chunk of its sale price. I don't know that it lays it out any clearer than anything else, but here's an interesting paragraph. Let's jump down here. To fully grok his take, get it? We've roughly transcribed the pertinent few minutes of his explanation from this morning when asked about the weekend call with Microsoft's Nadella. It's worth the read. Bold highlights our tech crunches. So this is, I guess, a quote from Trump's explanation of these. We had a great conversation. He called me to see whether or not how I felt about it. And I said, look, it can't be controlled for security reasons by China. Too big, too invasive. And it can't be. Here's the deal. I don't mind if, whether it's Microsoft or somebody else, a big company, a secure company, a very American company, buy it. It's probably easier to buy the whole thing than to buy 30% of it. Because I say, how do you do 30%? Who's going to get the name? The name is hot. The brand is hot. And who's going to get the name? How do you do that if it's owned by two different companies? With an effing contract, you moron. So my personal opinion was, you're probably better off buying the whole thing rather than buying 30% of it. I think buying 30% is complicated. And I suggested that he can go ahead. He can try. We set a date. I set a date of around September 15th, at which point it's going to be out of business in the United States. Why name a date? Because who needs certainty, right? Around then, 2 weeks, give or take. I don't know, in a very short period of time. But if somebody, whether it's Microsoft or somebody else, buys it, that'll be interesting. I did say that if you buy it, whatever the price is, that goes to whoever owns it, because I guess it's China, essentially. But more than anything else, I said a very substantial portion of that price is going to have to come to the Treasury of the United States, because we're making it possible for this deal to happen. Right now, they don't have any rights unless we give it to them. So if we're going to give them the rights, then it has to come into this country, which, again, he's not really describing a thing of any sort. And he's saying, well, we're the ones creating the sale. You're forcing a sale and then taking a cut of it. That is pretty ridiculous. It's a little bit like the landlord-tenant. Then he goes into the key money thing, right? The part that's new to us would have been He says it's like landlord-tenant. So they pay what's called key money, or they pay something. But the United States should be reimbursed or should be paid a substantial amount of money because without the United States, they don't have anything. At least having to do with the 30%. It's a nonsensical thing. But without the United States objecting to TikTok's continuing to do business in this country, which comes only from Trump at this point, then there's no fire sale, no necessity to sell at all, and Microsoft might not be able to make an offer to afford TikTok because maybe the Chinese don't want to sell it. But by forcing them to do it, that creates the hot property, and we should get that money. So I told him that. I think we're going to have, maybe it's a good deal going to be made. It's a great asset. But it's not a great asset in the United States unless they have the approval of the United States. So it'll close down on September 15th unless Microsoft or somebody else is able to buy it and work out a deal, an appropriate deal. So the Treasury the Treasury, I suppose you would say, of the United States gets a lot of money. I suppose you would say that because that's the Treasury you're supposed to be concerned about. What he's really saying, of course, is the Treasury of me in my pocket. But I guess so I don't get in any more trouble, the Treasury of the United States should maybe get that money. You damn well better hope it's the Treasury of the United States getting the money, or we've been waiting too long to arrest you, buddy.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, as always, great stories on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. Stories that we weren't able to get to today, like, look at this. We have your basket of deplorable QAnon-affiliated congressional candidates right here. Definitely wanted to get to that with more stories about the background of QAnon and other weirdness. Hopefully, we'll delve into that later in the week. See you then.